Hi, ship gardeners. Wow, we have so much growing today and so much to do. Let me show you all of my plants that are growing and all of the soil and materials I got together so that we can do our transplanting. So here you can see I've got a big pile of chipped up leaves that I mowed over with the lawnmower, so they're going to be used for hilling our potatoes. And I've got some soil that I dug up from under a leaf pile mixed up with some compost, and I've got a pot of worm castings there too, and I have a bowl of some green leaves that we're going to use for making our compost tea. Let's start with transplanting our kale and our beans to bigger pots. So remember, we had to wait for our first true leaves to emerge from the plants. So here you can see a kale seedling that has its little cotyledon leaves. Those are the little kind of round ones. And then it's growing its first true leaves. Those are the ones that have the ridges. So the rest of the leaves will look like the true leaves. So now that it has two true leaves, we know it's got enough roots and it's big enough and sturdy enough that we can move it to another pot. Our bean has true leaves too. Actually, the cotyledon leaf or seed leaf is this little curled up one right here. And then these bigger first leaves are the first true leaves, and my bean actually has a second leaf coming that looks like this. The rest of the bean leaves will be trifoliate or have 3 different leaflets on each leaf. So for pots, we'll be using a recycled pot for our kale, we'll make that, and the smaller fabric pot for the beans. So I'm going to just make this recycled pot. I'm going to cut off the top. You might get an adult to help you with this, but I'll poke a hole with some scissors and cut around the top. I'm going to leave it nice and deep so that the roots have lots of room to grow. And then we have to poke some holes in the bottom so that the water comes out and the roots don't get flooded and rot. Make sure you get some help with this part. Okay, I've got some holes on the bottom. Let's take the rest of your potting soil that's in your bag and we'll fill our pot for the kale. Pick your best pot that has the sturdiest plants. You can plant these other ones in different recycled pots and then you'll have more kale. So let's dig a hole in our recycled pot that's big enough to put this whole pot into. And this is a peat pot, so it's biodegradable. So the decomposing microorganisms in the soil are going to actually decompose this papery pot, and we don't have to remove the pot. But what we will do is sort of peel back the top of the pot, because we really don't want this top of the pot to touch the air at all, or else that will sort of dry out the whole rest of the pot. Now let's take our peat pot and we'll stick it down into our new container, and we're going to cover the entire peat pot definitely so that doesn't dry out. And we can even bury some of these leggy stems that got kind of too tall a little bit, so only the green leaves are poking out and the stems are partly buried. And we'll kind of press that down a little. Okay, that looks good. Now let's give it some water. You can use your same tag and stick it in. Great. Now let's work on our bean. Let's fill up our small fabric pot with the soil that we found or purchased. I can start with the rest of the soil that I've still got in my bag. Now I'm going to add lots of the soil that I found under my leaf piles and in my compost pile. And I'm going to mix that with some of these worm castings. My pot had gotten some mold on it, so I'm going to take off those moldy parts, and it really looks like my whole pot is going to come off, and that's fine too. I wonder if we could see any of those rhizobia bacteria nodules in the roots. They would be little pink balls on the roots, but mine doesn't have any yet, so I think it's a little too early. So let's plant our bean into the hole. We can bury the top of the stem just a little bit, but not too much. So you could have 1, 2, or 3 plants. And we'll give it a little moisture, and then we'll be watering it when it feels dry. All right, good work. Now it's time to hill our potatoes. You can see that my potatoes have gotten very leggy. So they have really long stems that have been stretching up to find the light. So I need to put them in a sunnier spot. That's okay though, because hilling is all about burying the stem of the potato and just leaving a little bit of leaves at the top. Remember, that's because the potatoes grow off the bottom of the stem. So if we bury the bottom of the stem, the potatoes have more space to grow. So I'm going to use a mixture of the soil that I found under my leaf piles and some of these dried leaves that I chipped up with the lawnmower. I'm going to mix that together with some of the worm castings from a worm composting bin. My last layer is going to be these chipped up leaves because that's going to act like mulch too. And mulch is amazing because it keeps the soil temperature nice and even. It keeps the soil from getting too cold or too hot, and it holds the water in so that when you're watering, the water doesn't evaporate and your pot stays nice and moist. And it also keeps weeds down if weeds were to try to grow. So here you can see that only the tops of the potatoes are poking out. The whole rest of that stem is buried. This will probably sink down a little bit and the potatoes will grow a lot taller. So I can add another layer of soil and mulch and hill these potatoes again. All right, time to make some compost tea. Compost tea is when we take some green leaves and we soak them in water and the nutrients go out into the water, and then we use those nutrients for plant food to water our plants and give them the nutrients they need to grow. You can do this with any kind of green fresh leaves. It could be grass, and it could be even some vegetable scraps like maybe a banana peel. So you can go outside and you can gather some green material, and then we're going to chop it up into little pieces so that the nutrients can move into the water more easily. And we'll fill our plastic container with these nice green leaves. I've got some chickweed here that grows outside in cooler weather, and I've got this henbit dead nettle. And did you know that both of these are edible wild plants? Okay, my container is nice and full. Let's add some water. Then we'll just loosely cover it. We want it to get a little bit of air so that those microorganisms in there can breathe and have oxygen. This is not the kind of tea that we drink. This is tea for plants, right? So we have to carefully write a tag and write compost tea on here so that everybody who sees this container knows that it's not to eat, not to drink, and not to throw out. And you can write the date too. So you'll let this sit for about 2 days. You can kind of jiggle it around and stir it a bit to keep it aerated, to keep the oxygen in there and mix it up a bit. So to use your compost tea, you're going to dilute it with half water. So half compost tea, half water. You'll take your compost tea and then you'll add just as much water as you have compost tea. That way it's not too strong. And then when it's a nice light see-through color, you can use it to water your plants. Yay, it's time to try the microgreens that we grew. Look at how nice they look. So they're about 1.5 inches big and they have some true leaves popping out. And we don't have to eat them all at once. Why don't we make a healthy snack and we'll just cut a few of these microgreens. Then we'll let the rest of them grow for another snack tomorrow. I'm gonna cut the microgreens. Once we cut their stems, they don't grow back, so it's just one time. But there are some babies down in there still. Then we want to rinse them, and then we want to clean up our area. We'll wash our hands because we were just gardening. Now let's taste a microgreen all by itself and just see what it tastes like. Wow, it tastes exactly like kale. Microgreens and kale are superfoods. They're packed with nutrients. So they've got fiber, they've got tons of vitamins and tons of minerals, and they're so tasty. So let's try to make a snack with 2 or more food groups because that makes a healthy snack. So I went in the cabinet and I found a rice cake. I could have also used maybe a tortilla or a cracker or a piece of bread. You can do so much with microgreens. I've got some hummus here. You could use some cheese. So now I've got 2 food groups because I've got my grain, that's my rice cake, and I've got my hummus, which is made out of chickpeas. That's a protein. And I'm putting my microgreens on top. So we have a 3 food group snack. That's really healthy. Let's give it a try. You can put your microgreens on sandwiches or salads or rice bowls or pasta, or just decorate any of your food with them. They don't last very long, so you probably want to use them up within a couple of days, 2, 3, 4 days maybe. You can pick them all at once, or you can just pick them little by little. Great work, you grew your own food. That's wonderful. So now you can tend your veggie garden and wait until it's time to harvest. So your potatoes will start to grow at the bottom of the potato stem, and you can dig around in the dirt a little and look and see if you can see any baby teeny tiny potatoes start to grow. And then your beans will get big and then they'll start to flower, and each of those flowers will turn into a teeny tiny bean which will grow bigger. And when the green beans are big, you can pick them and eat them. And your kale plant will grow bigger, and you can start picking it as soon as it has some bigger leaves. So for kale, you'll pick the leaves on the outside of the plant and leave the teeny little leaves on the inside of the plant to grow bigger. So the kale plant will keep growing. You'll just be picking the outside leaves and the inside leaves will keep growing. So have so much fun growing all of your spring vegetables. I can't wait for your garden to grow and for you to try the food that you grew yourself. Great work, everybody. Bye.